Hi, this is Mori reporting from Berlin. I am a UI engineer and front-end developer, and in this video I want to show you how to combine React and D3. I think it's a really good time to jump into D3 because they introduced a new way to work with D3 and charts, which is easier and much more approachable. And React also introduced React hooks, which makes working with D3 a bit easier because you don't have to rely on class components and lifecycle methods anymore. And yeah, for this video, I'm going to use Create React App. It's a simple tool to create a React app quickly without worrying about the setup. And I did this already. I installed it. I ran it in my folder. And this is what you get. This is what the app looks like. And yeah, let's get started. So this particular video is going to be about the basics of using D3 in React. And it is not going to be very visual. It's not going to be about a fancy or a useful chart in the end. It is going to be about what is the so-called general update pattern in D3. And we're just going to render an SVG with some dots or circles in it and see how this general update pattern works. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace everything my app renders here per default and replace it with an SVG. And then I'm going to remove this logo I don't need. In the style sheets, I'm going to remove everything and just add one style here to make my SVG a bit more visible. Like so. And as you can see, here is my SVG. It has a default dimension of 300 by 150. And yeah. Now, what we need to do is, or what we need to prepare is, in order to work with D3 and React, we actually need to access our SVG DOM element with D3. And in order to access the DOM element in React and pass it to D3, we have to use a special hook called useRef, like so. And it works like this. I will say const svgref equals useRef, and then pass it to my SVG like this. And the way this works is the first time this SVG renders in the browser, we will have access to it in React in this with this SVGref variable. And the best time to access it is actually in another hook called useEffect. useEffect will be called for the first time when the DOM elements have been rendered, so we can access the SVG from there. Be like this. And the way useEffect works is it will be called once when the DOM elements have been rendered, and it will also be called again when elements in this array, in this dependency array, change. So in this case, we just want it to be called once when the DOM elements have been rendered. So we will just say console log svgref to see what is actually in the svgref. I'm going to save it and see how this looks like. And as you can see here, svgref is an object with a property current, and this is where our SVG lives. And this is what we need to work with D3. So what we need to do next is to pass this SVG to D3 and wrap it with D3. And in order to do that, we need to install D3 first, of course. Install D3. And then I'm going to start importing select from D3. So the select will make this SVG available to D3 so that we can do all sorts of stuff with it. I will just say const svg select svgref current, because the SVG was living in the current property. So, and like I said, we want to render an SVG with some dots and circles in it. We also need some data because D3 is all about data, right? So let's just define a data array, and I'm just gonna write some random numbers in here, which I'm gonna use for the circles, like this. Okay, and now I have the data. I have wrapped my SVG in D3 select, and now I'm actually ready to draw some things. So the next line I'm going to write is probably going to be the hardest parts of this video, but I'm going to write it down anyway, and I'm going to explain it to you immediately after. So like I said, I want to render some dots or circles in my SVG based on the data I have, and that's why I'm going to go write SVG, select all circle, data, data. So what's happening here? What I'm basically telling D3 to do is, hey, select all the circles you find in my SVG and synchronize them with the data I am defining here. Yeah, as you can see, the data is an array with 5 elements. And this is where D3 kind of figures out, hey, you gave me 5 elements here. You gave me an array of 5 elements. And you told me to synchronize them with a circle you have in your SVG, but you don't have any circles in your SVG. So this is why I give you, first, you need 5 new elements in your SVG. Second, you don't need to update any other element in your SVG because you don't have any circle in your SVG. And also, you don't need to remove any circle from your SVG because you don't have more circles in your SVG than the data you gave me. So this is basically what D3 then tells you. It gives you information about the elements which need to enter your SVG in D3 terms. It tells you about the elements which need to update in your SVG and elements which need to be removed from your SVG. And this is where the new D3 API comes in. It's called join. And this is where you define what you want to do with these 3 kinds of elements. The elements you want to create, the elements which enter, the elements which update, and the elements which exit. And for that, you have to define a callback each. And the first callback is the enter callback. I'll say what I want to do with a new piece of data. Here I would say enter append circle. Then I would define what I want to do with the elements which are already there and need to update. I would say enter, I would say update attr class updated. So this will attach the class updated to every updated element, every updated circle. And here I would define what to do with elements which are no longer needed or which should be removed. I would say exit remove. So let's see how this looks like. So as you can see, I have an SVG here now with 5 circles. And this is happening here in the enter callback. And if I were to say enter class new, you would see that all the circles now have a class called new. And they're not getting updated because Create React App is building everything from scratch when I'm saving the file. And in order to test these other 2 callbacks, we have to change a few things. We have to make sure that this data is dynamic and that it is changing inside the app. And to do that, I am going to save it in a third hook, in a use state hook, like this. Set data, use state, which data have as default. I will import use state. All right, and then I will change what is getting rendered and wrap this in a React fragment. Oops, fragment. And here I want to render a button which says update data, where I change the data. So when I say on click, I want to set the data, and actually I want to map over the data to change the values. I would say each value will get increased by 5. So, and one more thing, as you can see also by these squiggly lines or wiggly lines or whatever, React or Create React App in this case will warn you with hooks if your dependencies are not right. As I said, I want the data to be dynamic, and I want this code block to be called every time the data changes. So that's why I have to pass the data I have defined here also in the dependencies array. I had this, it was empty in the beginning because I wanted everything to be called once, but now I have to call it every time the data changes. So let's see how this looks like. So here you see my SVG and this new button I added, which says update data. And you can see I have 5 circles here which have been freshly created. And now if I press this button, you can see that their classes become updated. And this happens here in the update callback. Now let's test the exit callback. I will add another button for that. I'll just say filter data, which filters my data for values smaller than 35. Okay, let's go back. Now you can see I again have 5 freshly created circles. I press filter data, and you can see 3 of them remain and get updated because their value attached to them is less than 35, and 2 of them get removed. So what is happening step by step? When I press this button here, obviously the data changes by this set data function. And when the data changes, the use effects function triggers, because this will trigger every time the data changes. And then it will run all this code again and check for all the circles which are already there. So when I press this filter data button, it will find 5 circles. Then it will say, hey, I have 5 circles, but the data here I have, it is only 3. So it is only 3 pieces. So then it will say, D3 will say, hey, 3 of them need to be updated and 2 of them need to be removed. And this is when the callbacks then kick in. So this is the general update pattern, and I want to show you one more cool thing about this new join API. And before I do that, I have to show you how to actually make use of these values we have defined up here, because so far we have not made any use of them in our circles. And to do that, I will just add another attribute to my entering circles, the attribute R, which is a radius of a circle element. And instead of writing a value here directly, I can just pass in a function. And this function will receive the associated value of that element as an argument. So the first entering circle will have 25, the second one will have 30, and so on. So we will just return this value here. We could mess with it if we wanted to, but we will not mess with the radius here. But we will add another attribute. Let's add more attributes here. The cx attribute, which is the x-coordinate of a circle. Let's say that is the value times 2. And let's add another attribute, cy, it's the y-coordinate. Let's say value also times 2. And we will also add one more attribute, stroke, to make them a bit more distinguishable, red. So let's see how this looks like. So now we can actually see some circles. They have a radius, they have a red stroke color, and they're black because the default fill color is black. So what would happen now if I were to click on update data? And as you might remember here, I defined update data like this, and if I click on update data, the data will change, and each value will be increased by 5. So I will just click it. And as you can see, the values here, they don't change. Only the class gets updated. And why is that? It is because this update callback here, it doesn't know about these values. So I would have to copy these 3 values here also. And then the updating elements will also reflect these value changes. So let's see if this works. If I now click on update data, they will change. Now I have fine control over entering and updating elements, which is nice. But what I don't like is that I have to repeat myself here, because in my case, I just want my entering and my updating elements to behave the same way. And yeah, how can I solve this? I can do the following. I can just cut these attributes I have defined here for entering elements and remove these attributes I have defined for the updating elements and just paste these attributes after the join. And what will happen now is join will actually handle a combination of both entering and updating elements, so you don't have to repeat yourself. These changes you have defined here, they will apply to both entering and updating elements. So let's test this. If I now see, yeah, now you can see like the new circles, they already have a circle. I mean, they have a radius. And if I press update data, they will get updated and also reflect the value changes. Furthermore, I actually don't need this exit callback because the way it is written here, it is actually a D3 default. It will remove exiting elements automatically. So let's just test it. If I now filter the data, the circles will be removed anyway. So, and if I didn't need these attributes, which I just added for the purposes of my video, I could also just remove this update callback entirely. And if I remove this class also for the entering elements, and if my join actually just looks like this with a simple enter callback, which appends a circle, I could also just replace this with this. So what join does with this simple syntax is it creates a circle for you for every entering element. It will update every entering and updating element with these attribute changes, and it will remove the circles which are no longer needed. So to test this new, more concise syntax, if I come here and update my data, you can see the value changes are reflected in the circles, and if I filter data, they will all be removed because no circle has a radius of less than 35 anymore. This is basically all that I have for this video. This is the general update pattern. This is the new general update pattern. Earlier, you had to define multiple code blocks to handle entering elements, to handle updating elements, to handle exiting elements. And also when working with React, you had to use class components, and you had to handle your entering elements in componented mounts. You had to handle your updating elements in componented updates. and it was quite verbose. And now it is much more concise, and this is how you can approach D3. So I hope you liked this video, and for those who might say, wow, I could have just done everything in this video with just React. I don't need D3 to render some circles based on data in SVG. There I would say you're absolutely right. You don't actually need D3 for use cases like this, but it is still important to know these basics of D3, and I hope that I will show you the true value of D3 in some upcoming videos where we will tackle some more complex shapes and axes and scales and stuff. So hope to see you then. Bye.